Good evening and welcome to the National Debate. I'm Madhav Das Gopalakrishnan. Viewers, India-Canada ties have hit a new low, with India launching a diplomatic counter-strike against Canada's Trudeau government over its wild and dangerous allegations. Earlier this week, India recalled its High Commissioner in Canada and other diplomats whom Canada sought to link with Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killing. This was then followed by the Canadian Prime Minister's own embarrassing admission that he never had any evidence to share with the Indian government regarding his allegations. While deposing before the Foreign Interference Commission, Trudeau admitted that when his country first accused India of involvement, they were only acting on the basis of intelligence and not evidence.
We chose to continue to work behind the scenes to try and get India to cooperate with us. Their asks of us was, well, how much do you know? Give us the evidence you have on this. And our response was, well, it's within your security agencies. You should be looking into how much they know. You should be engaging. It's, oh, no, tell us what you know. Show us the evidence. And at that point, it was primarily intelligence, not hard evidentiary proof. So we said, well, let's work together and look into your security services, and maybe we can get that done.
What this basically means is that all the claims of sharing proof with India were nothing but a bunch of lies. One wonders on what basis has Canada been dialing up all its friendly nations from the United States to UK and New Zealand to malign India on a global platform. While lack of evidence against Nijjar is one aspect, his continued insistence on ignoring the fact that Nijjar was a terrorist is another. India has named Nijjar in a charge sheet detailing his activities. The NIA in a charge sheet filed last year said that Nijjar was a self-styled chief of the Khalistan Tiger Force, which is the main conspirator in killings and extortion in Punjab and other places. So what exactly are the compulsions behind Trudeau's insistence on India's role in the matter? And how will this further impact Canada's ties with India and other regional allies? Let's quickly recap some of the details in relation to this entire controversy. First, of course, are the statements that have come in from Justin Trudeau. In fact, we've seen how in the 18th of September 2023, it's that agents of Indian government carried out Nijjar killing was the statement that had come out. In fact, credible reasons to believe that India was involved in the killing was what he said on the 21st of September 2023. And now on the 14th of October 2024, the Indian envoy and other diplomats are persons of interest. Now, this is really what set the cat amongst the pigeons. These are the statements that really, of course, sparked off the entire series of events. Now, what really has transpired over here? On the one hand, you have Trudeau coming out to say that we only had intelligence on Indian agencies. India has come out to say that Canada has given no proof whatsoever in all of its communication. Let's quickly take it across to the other aspects that we're talking about when it comes to Trudeau versus what Trudeau has said earlier. He says that we had intelligence and not hard evidence. India said that it's no proof by Canada to support all of these charges. And lastly, when it comes to Trudeau's statements and the contradictions, Canada didn't have hard evidentiary proof, and India said that this is a cavalier behavior by Justin Trudeau. Now, this is, of course, the fourth aspect. India kept asking us for evidentiary proof is what Trudeau says, and India says the onus of damaging ties is nothing but on Prime Minister Trudeau in this particular case. Let's quickly take this across to our guests now who are joining us for the National Debate this evening. We have Major General Dhruv Katoj, retired Director of the India Foundation. Suraj Goyal is a former ambassador. We have with us in the studio Smita Prakash, editor of ANI. Sushil Pandit, activist, is with us. Joining us all the way from Canada are four very special guests. We have Daniel Boardman, Canadian journalist, joining us. We also have Dean Baxdale, publisher and columnist and CEO of Optimum Publishing International. We also have Anis Farooqi, senior Canadian journalist, joining us on the forum. Let's go across to our guest now. We have Dean Baxendale, publisher and columnist, CEO of Optimum Publishing. Dean Baxendale, my first question to you is that why would Justin Trudeau put out such claims on the basis only of intelligence and not on the basis of evidence, as is now quite evident from his own statements?
Well, I think that, when this first emerged back last September in the House of Commons, where he, ostensibly came out and said that they had credible intelligence that suggested the Indian government was linked to the assassination of Nijjar. He was basically that, yes, on intelligence, but very credible intelligence that was also being corroborated by the United States government. We also have a scenario, as you know, today, that the key individual, Pradar, was actually indicted in the U.S. By the DEA for the assassination plot. And we now, obviously the evidence, which the RCMP cannot divulge, because of the actual investigation, because that would jeopardize potentially a conviction in this case. But you have politics, and you have a situation where apparently the individual linked to the United States and was speaking to an undercover agent and shared the picture of the Nijjar assassination with that target, who is now indicted, who is linked directly to Modi and Modi's office.
No, I think that's taking it a bit far. Smita Prakash, many would say that directly linking the US case with the Canada case is perhaps stretching it. He may have shared some information related to Nijjar, but does that mean the two cases are linked?
See, firstly, the whole point about it was credible evidence, credible intelligence, and because the US corroborated it, it becomes all the more credible. Sorry, that's not how we believe it, because if that was the case, then we would think twice. If you remember the slam dunk which George Tenet had done, that WMDs are there in Iraq and then went to war just because they had credible intelligence on that matter. I'm sorry, I refuse to believe that. As far as relating the two cases are concerned, sure, when there is a strategic alliance between the Five Eyes nations, they will support each other. It's expected, but that is fine, you supporting each other, but till there is proof not given, if proof is not submitted, then just based on your conjecture or your belief or your credible intelligence, no. Give us proof. There is no proof to say that this person existed, this person was working in the cabinet secretariat. Where is the proof? Even Indians who are picking up that line from the Canadians, I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense. Where is the proof that they were working for, that he was there in working for the RAW, which is the Indian intelligence arm? There is no proof as yet. And already the Indian External Affairs Ministry spokesperson has said that that person does not work in the government of India anymore. So right. Where is he? What is he? Give us the proof. The Indian government has to give the proof.
Right, and this
so
also
no.
Yeah, and this also becomes very important, Anis Farooqui, because you have the Indian government which has given, at least 26 extradition requests over the years of individuals who are known to have committed acts of violence. If Canada does not act on such incidents and such individuals who are part of known groups, several of them are proscribed terrorists, why on earth would India even act? If Canada is not cooperating, isn't it a bit rich of Canada to expect India to then act?
Well, the thing is, we have to understand two things. One is as earlier said, is the political motives, and another one is the hard facts. Now, the way it works in Canada, that if you have intelligence, that means that the secret agencies have done their due diligence and have some linkage to this event of murder of Nijjar. And that linkage went all the way to the High Commission. But the thing is, even if a crime happened in Canada and there's a person of interest, that person of interest never get arrested, let alone they've been expelled. So that's kind of a political mistake that I see on part of Justin Trudeau, because he took it a little bit far and without having some kind of documentation to be provided to the government of India. But then at the same time, Five Eyes nations is not a joke. It's not a joke. There has been a continuous investigation happening throughout within the US and Canada, and there are credible links, credible intelligence. What do you need as an evidence? Do we need to provide you a CCTV footage? Do we need to provide you some eyewitnesses killing this Nijjar? There have been investigation, there have been linkage, there have been credible intelligence, and at a level of the head of a state of Canada is saying that means it's not something that you should ignore and look into it. And I think the best thing would have been to cooperate with Canadians to look into this investigation jointly, and this would have not gone this far.
Ambassador Suresh Goyal, I'd like you to comment on this, because here you're saying that on the one hand that intelligence is to be taken as something serious because agencies have done their due diligence. Does that really apply in this particular case, especially when it comes to diplomacy? And secondly, can India underplay the fact that the Five Eyes countries are standing solidly with Canada? Please respond to both those arguments.
I will come to the second question in a minute, but let me come to the basic thing really. And I'm going to really come about why is what happening really now on the ground. First of all, out of all the Five Eyes, have you seen any other leader of any other country except Canada going to public with the public statements to the media in the manner that he's doing it? I have not heard Biden or even Blinken doing it. I have not heard Starmer doing it or Albanese or anybody doing it. Why is Trudeau, out of all the Five Eyes, why is he doing it? I don't think that he's foolish enough to really take a plunge into the media in this manner. After all, he's the Prime Minister, therefore he must understand the implications of making statements of this kind. Number one. Number two, you see, as a diplomat, I know that statecraft is never ever simply straight. It's a murky area. Things happen there which we don't even know about, which we sometimes don't understand, which we sometimes come to know only later. But the point really here is that depending on the nature of relations between the two countries, either we talk about those things in public or we talk about those things in quiet manner really, or try and push them under some other carpet so that it does not impact on the relationship. USA is an example. Even though they are talking about pardon, but they are not gone to the extent of really, taking it to the public here. Why is Trudeau doing it? My sense is, and that is where the Five Eyes and what is happening in Canada, in my sense, come through. My sense is that for some reason, Justin Trudeau has begun to act as the cat's paw for the other Five Eyes countries to keep India under the pressure. It is not domestic politics. Domestic politics, I'm quite sure that he could have managed with the coalitions and the support in some other manner. But if he's doing it on his own, I think that is foolishness. If he's doing it along with the support of the Five Eyes, that means the Five Eyes are in the game, but they're not speaking out. And they're letting Trudeau speak.
Okay.
So there is some kind of a thing there. And my only sense is they want to keep India under pressure for some reason or the other. We can talk about that later.
All right. Daniel Boardman is a Canadian journalist also with us. Daniel Boardman, do you buy that theory that somehow Justin Trudeau's become the cat's paw of the other Five Eyes countries? It's not about domestic politics. It doesn't have to do as much, is what the ambassador here in our studio is telling us. Do you agree with that contention, or is it purely a political ploy given that it's an election year in Canada?
So I don't think it's purely anything when it comes to this. It's always a confluence of factors. Now, in terms of election year, Trudeau's going to lose the election. He's so far underwater. The Conservatives are beating the Liberals and the NDP combined. Currently, the Liberals are projected to come in fourth place and be obliterated as a party. There's really nothing he can do to win. Now, you can make the argument that by solidifying Khalistani support in the 25 ridings they control, he might be able to maintain official party status, and therefore the federal party will still be funded by taxpayer dollars for the next 4 years. Like, that's your political argument you can make. In terms of like the cat's paw with the Five Eyes, if Justin Trudeau probably can't do this without the blessing of the other Five Eyes countries, which is something. Keep in mind, Trudeau is also on the outs in some ways with the Five Eyes countries because of our infiltration by China, that the other Five Eyes countries have started to sort of pull away from us and form sort of separate.
Very interesting contention there. They're already under the pressure of the other Five Eyes countries because of what's been happening vis-a-vis China. And that perhaps really goes to show, in fact, on a lighter note, things are so bad for Trudeau that even Jagmeet Singh is pitching to become Prime Minister of Canada now.
God help us if that happens.
No, actually, it is a very strange situation in which this particular episode has been played out. And I think it reflects great immaturity on the part of the Prime Minister of Canada actually to have gone around that path. It is not required. Simply let us understand, we are two democracies, and it would behove both of them to have worked together. Even if there was a problem with one, it could have been resolved, as the ambassador very correctly said. You have a quiet conversation and we can resolve things. But in this particular case, I think the problem is that for a very long time, the Indian agencies have been requesting the Canadian authorities, listen, you have got terrorists on your soil. Please don't be like Pakistan. You see, Pakistan is a state sponsor of terrorism. Would Canada like to go that way? Would you like to be a state sponsor of terrorism? Now, that is the question which has to be asked to them. Now, President Trudeau, instead of going around that path and saying, okay, if you have a problem, let's see what we can do. I mean, he has gone around to the extent of directly blaming the ambassador, the Indian High Commissioner to Canada, and 5 of his diplomats of complicity in a murder, which was in real effect a gangland killing. I think the Canadians don't understand this gangland business, which goes on all the time in India, especially in Punjab, especially in the Gurdwaras, where there is a conflict between two interests. I mean, I have lived for a very large portion of my younger life in Punjab, where in the 50s and the 60s, you know, if there was a murder in one place, it would be avenged very quickly, and this gang war would continue till finally both sides said, okay, we've had enough. What you are seeing in Canada, in this Gurdwara, is a gang war. It has taken place in other areas also, but this was the specific. It is control of the Gurdwara, which has a huge amount of money. Now, if they don't understand that, that is well and good. But if they think that the Indian ambassador is going to get involved in a gang war, you know, I think they've got it horribly wrong, and they need to go back to the basics. The second point, you know, the statement which was made, I think by one of your guests, one of the panelists, he said, if the Prime Minister of Canada is saying so, it is so. Come on. The Prime Minister of Canada can say anything. At one time of time, the President of the United States said there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and they went to war. Now, it doesn't really matter what politicians say. Please provide the proof. If you have to go to a court of law, and I may be very convinced that one particular chap has committed murder, but when I go to a court of law, whether it is an Indian court of law or a Canadian court of law, the judge will say, what is the evidence?
Absolutely. And more so when you're going to the People's Court in a few months.
There is no evidence. For God's sake, some Twitter channel, somebody has made a statement to somebody else. Somebody's bragging, okay, I've done this. I have seen in my own service people brag about things which they know nothing about. That is not intelligence.
Absolutely. Let me, in fact, take that question across to Dean Baxendale. Dean Baxendale, you know, one has to treat every politician's statement with some amount of cynicism, because, I mean, that's how political discourse works at the end of the day, because politicians are people who we hold to account. They are to ultimately serve the people. And to that extent, the contention that's been made by the general here, that, you know, in Punjab and otherwise in Canada as well, there's a lot of this factional killing between different groups that happens. There are murders that are avenged. But to link what's happening between these criminals to a government, and that to a friendly nation, is something that cannot be done without solid evidence. Unfortunately, in this case, Mr. Trudeau seems to have done that, which is really, and you know, people in Canada would be asking. You have Liberal MPs today who are asking for Trudeau to step down. So the question is whether Mr. Trudeau has, you know, played too much of his cards, and whether he's played it horribly wrong without thinking about the consequences for both the countries.
Well, okay, so a year ago when Trudeau did this, as I mentioned, in my column in the Sunday Guardian, I made it clear that at that time, Justin Trudeau had made the calculation that this would help by him coming out publicly in the House of Commons, accusing the Indian government of a extrajudicial killing, that this would deflect from the pressure regarding foreign interference by China. So that's absolutely was the political motivation at the time. Fast forward a year, though, it's a very complex situation. The fact that transnational organized crime groups on Canadian soil have been used by China, India, Pakistan, Russia, Iran, to be involved with transnational oppression, assaults, intimidation, is an actual issue that has involved various governments. And it appears from the indictment in the United States that there is now credible evidence linking the Indian government to the actual individual who was with the government, is no longer agreed, but he is charged. So it's a very complex issue, but yes, this is in part about politics. Trudeau is in trouble politically, and certainly trying to deflect from the foreign interference inquiry on China may absolutely be his motivation.
No, but Mr. Baxendale, I want to come back to you, because at the end of the day, we have addressed the issue of US, but you know, you have a situation where the 4 persons who've been accused of the Nijjar killing, their trial hasn't yet taken off. So many are asking what exactly is happening. You're expecting a lot of India, but what about Canada's own legal system, where you don't even have these people charge sheeted or acted upon?
And this has been a problem here in Canada for 40 years. We can go back to the Air India bombing and ultimately the botched handling by the RCMP of the recording the actual conversations between the conspirators in the Air India bombing, and ultimately that allowed a number of individuals who should have been charged and gone to for life imprisonment for the deaths of all the people that perished in that tragic day. And of course, there would have been another airplane blow up, as we know, from Japan. So we have not dealt with this. CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Agency, has had information on this kind of operation in Canada before, and certainly the Khalistani separatists who have done and have killed and murdered Indian citizens on Indian soil. We needed to address this. We haven't. It speaks to, unfortunately, that our national security apparatus at this point in time needs to be revamped, and we really need to come out strongly and deal with these kinds of issues on Canadian soil. Here we have Palestinian people linked to Hamas raising funds for terrorist operations back in Gaza. So, yes, this is a significant problem. Canada needs to get on top of it. And failure to do so will put us in a serious
there are all sorts of problems there, Sushil Pandit. I don't know where to begin. But here's the essence of the problem. Here you have people who, extradition requests have gone forward. They're not acted upon. There are people who are accused. The legal system hasn't even started the process. It's been over a year, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And, of course, you have charges on the basis of suspicion asking a friendly nation to take action. So there's a stark contrast in the approach of India, in the approach of what India has been affected by and the action that's been taken by Canada. If you look at it vice versa, there's a very, very contrasting set of pictures that we're looking at.
Absolutely, Madhav. In fact, this is common knowledge that Indo-Canadian relations have been frosty, to put it mildly, over the years. There has been a sulking Canadian Prime Minister because he wasn't probably getting what he thought was his due from Indian government. We were not kowtowing to him. We were not extending all kinds of privileges to him as he expected to be one of the, key Western powers. And chances are, this is a case of chopping your nose to spite your face. He was looking for even half an opportunity to get even, get back, with good political reasons back home, to be seen as someone closer to the Khalistani element, the anti-India element within the electoral mathematics of Canada. And getting not even evidence or not even decent intelligence latching onto it to make such huge claims publicly in order to embarrass India is something that really falls in place. It looks like he was in a hurry to settle scores and use this as a hatchet.
Right.
And in the process, destroy Indo-Canadian relationship in such a short while. And look at this. This is the contrast with the rest of the Five Eyes countries who have been very measured. You see, any relationship between two countries, as Ambassador pointed out, is dealt with far more maturely. And Nijjar was not such a great strategic asset of Canada. And
Yes.
it hasn't harmed Canada. But the way you've made it out to be, dragged the relationship down to dumps with these precipitate actions, speaks volumes of other malicious intent and not what is stated upfront as the reason for doing so.
All right. I'm going to come across to Smita in just a minute, but let's quickly take a look at who Nijjar really is. What is the person that we're talking about? Why is this individual so controversial? Nijjar has been declared a terrorist by the government of India. This is something that Trudeau is aware of. There are NIA charge sheets, and this is information that's in the public domain. It's part of the Indian legal process. The charge sheet says that Nijjar is the main conspirator in several such cases, conspired to commit terror acts in Punjab. The next frame, of course, shows how Nijjar conspired with Arshdeep and others. Arshdeep, of course, referring to Arshdeep Dalla, one of the other persons who India wants from Canadian soil. Co-conspirators nabbed. Nijjar is absconding, is what India has said. In fact, this is as far as the NIA charge sheet, as I mentioned. The KTF, or the Khalistan Terror Force, is a spin-off from the Babbar Khalsa International. The KTF aims to revive terror in Punjab. Now, this is, of course, statements that have come in as far as the NIA charge sheet is concerned. Now, given that, Smita Prakash, here is a person who, as far as the Indian legal process, and this is not any intelligence dossier, this is a charge sheet backed by evidence that is presented before a court of law. And there is therefore the certain amount of difference and certain amount of sensitivity that any country which is a democracy, which would have a legal system, should perhaps be sensitive to.
And do you think that the Canadians don't know? They've known it for decades on end. Today, the situation is such that they're being ostrich-like. Whether it is the KTF, whether it is the Babbar Khalsa, who you just mentioned, do you think that they're active any longer in India? No, since the 1980s, late 1980s, they are not active out here. Where are they active? They are active in Canada, and Trudeau should know that. Today, we are calling them Khalistani separatists, Khalistani. But today, literally, the street in India is angry that our Indian diplomats and are not talking about these Khalistani separatists or these Khalistani terrorists as Khalistanis. Why should they be called Khalistanis? They should be called Canadian terrorists, because they have been living there since the 1980s, 90s. The Canadians have suffered as much as we have suffered. Canadians, when I say Canadians have suffered, I mean ordinary Canadians. How many people died in that? In the aircraft, in the Kanishka bombing. Who were they? They were Canadians who died. They were children who died. And in spite of that, do you think they don't know? The general mentioned gangland killings which happened in India, in the Gurdwara politics which happened. The Sikhs established the first Gurdwara in Canada when? In the early 1900s. They have known what Gurdwara politics is. They have seen Gurdwara gangland killings. They have witnessed it. So today saying ki Bishnoi gang, this gang, that gang, Bishnoi is sitting in jail. Are your terrorists sitting in jail? No, they are not. So how can they point to us? And one of the panelists says that India should not ignore the intelligence which is given. Whoever said that India is ignoring it? India has not said. India is investigating. We're not saying that. We're saying give us evidence. At no point of time has India dismissed any of the information given by Canada or given by Trudeau. What is bizarre is being accused of doing killings without giving absolute concrete evidence. I think Trudeau's making all kinds of allegations across, bizarre allegations without giving proof. So there he needs to do it. And the other thing which I want to point out is, quickly, I just want to point out is, as one of the journalists who said that it seems like, he's conflating many issues because he's desperate to win the next election and just throw mud all over the place.
Is joining us. We have Terry Milewski, senior journalist, with us. We also have, in fact, Ujjwal Dosanjh, who's a former minister of Canada. Ujjwal Dosanjh, I'd just like to read out, welcome to the debate. I'd just like to read out a quick question from, an editorial, an article in the National Post, where senior journalist John Iveson has noted that Canada has allowed Sikh extremism to flourish within the border diaspora politics, and it has, impacted as far as the foreign policy is concerned unduly. We've been debating this for some time now, and somewhere or the other, the question about why this kind of sentiment, allowing those who are preaching a kind of violent ideology, is actually tolerated within Canada, is a larger question in the context of what Prime Minister Trudeau has done over the past few weeks.
Well, Canada has been a home to Khalistani terror since the 80s. This had died down actually from the 80s and 90s. I think it sort of reared its ugly head more so with Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Trudeau is surrounded by the Khalistanis. They've been in his cabinet. They've been with him right from the moment of his leadership. And he has never, in clear terms, condemned the Khalistani extremism, violence, the hate speeches that people are making in the temples. Mr. Nijjar, he's on YouTube making horribly violent speeches in the temple before he died. That's one aspect. The other aspect, of course, is that there is now evidence that's available to anybody who wants to look at the American indictment that there may be involvement by Indian agents. Whether it's through gangsters or not, that's an issue for the courts to decide at the end. There'll be trials, and you'll see the evidence coming out in the trials. This is not about whether India is correct or Canada is correct. This is about trying to resolve an issue that is actually killing the diplomatic relationships and the people-to-people relations between India and Canada, and that's pretty serious. And And so, I'll give you my 2 cents.
What is your wager on why
India-
did Trudeau make that claim? Is it because he's a cat's paw for the Five Eye countries? Is it because of domestic politics and it's an election year? What are your wagering your bets on?
Oh, I think it's all of those. It's the Five Eyes. It's Mr. Trudeau's own troubles. It is also, there is evidence available. So it's all of those things, and one shouldn't ignore that. We can engage in jingoism as Canadians or as Indians. We should get past that and try and repair this relationship. Let the courts do their job. Let the police do their job. And in the end, it's up to us as leaders in different countries to make sure that our relationship is not harmed beyond repair.
All right, Ambassador Suresh Goyal, how would you respond to that? It's up to us to repair the relationship, but it really seems to be an uphill task at the moment.
Why should we? And why do we need to? Where do we depend upon Canada for what? I would like to ask them. I mean, they were the first one, when we had the first peaceful nuclear explosion, they were the ones to cut off our nuclear supplies. So why should we go back to them? I'm sorry. I mean, I don't think we owe anything to Canada really in any sense whatsoever. Let me come back to a few things. You talk about the court. Which court? Will it be tried in the Canadian court or the Indian court? Which laws will apply? I'm sorry. The laws are different in the two countries. Intelligence is different. Investigations are different. The two countries work on the basis of understanding, not court processes. Court processes come in the way of immigration, the laws of migration, etc., etc. The laws are not the thing here. Therefore, I don't think we will talk about court. They talk about the standards. I was in Security Council in 1991 or 92 when Colin Powell came and very dramatically he took out a bottle of white powder and saying, Mr. President, this is a bottle of anthrax which Iraqis are spreading all over the USA. It turned out to be simply some white chalk powder.
Right.
So where is the lie? Osama bin Laden, where was he when he was extracted by the US forces? Was he on the American soil? Why do they need to apply different standards to India and to Canada and to the USA? Let me make it very clear. If there is a person who is considered to be the enemy of the state by India, I think Indian government has every right to take him out wherever he is. And that is our law.
All right. Terry Milewski, do you agree with that? That if there is a person who's an enemy of the state, the Indian government has a right to take him out wherever he or she is. Do you agree with that contention? Terry Milewski.
In Canadian law, no, it doesn't. The problem at the moment is that the Indian side in this, with whom I greatly sympathize because of Canada's abysmal failure for more than 40 years now, deal with and address and take seriously Palestinian violence and threats. Nevertheless, Indians now are sort of arguing on the one hand, on Mondays and Tuesdays, they argue that, hey, this is hypocrisy by the West. Everybody does it. Everybody goes and assassinates their enemy. Then on Wednesdays and Thursdays, you argue that we didn't do it. Well, pick a lane. It's one or the other, guys. Then, unfortunately, India seems to be making a habit of this kind of contradictory argument. It needs to do a little bit better. For example, it repeatedly says that the same allegations were made by the U.S. and by Canada get a completely different reaction. In the case of the United States, they say, oh, well, this is very serious. We're going to take it very seriously. We're going to set up a high-level committee. This committee is in the United States. And, we're certainly not dismissing this. No, not at all. And then the same allegations, and yes, they are the same allegations by the Canadians. And the Indian says, it's absurd, it's preposterous, it's rubbish. And Trudeau's lying, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's an idiot. They brush it aside. Well, that may fairly reflect relative geopolitical clout carried by Canada and the US. Maybe you can get away with pushing Canada around in a way that you can't get away with pushing the United States around. But get it straight, guys, you can't have it both ways. And stop this argument, which I hear repeatedly, that, oh, no, those are completely different cases. And if you read the U.S. indictment, it says the targets of this plot are both Canoon in New York and Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada.
Right.
They say it's the same plot.
Let me put this question. That's a very interesting point, but let me put it in a slightly different perspective, Sushil Pandit. When you talk about the Five Eye countries, there are Five Eye countries which, of course, have a huge presence internationally, huge presence in media. And given the traditional links that we've seen between the intelligence agencies of these countries and the narrative building or the kind of media outlets over there, trying to convince international opinion, that could be a big challenge for India in coming days?
Yes, of course. And I think India's track record and conduct will hold us in good stead there. But this is a little too rich, trying to draw a parallel between the US and Canada and say allegations are the same and both the countries are getting different responses. I beg to differ. In the case of US, keeping in mind the valuability of the relationships, we've been told in the manner befitting two friends that, listen, this is what we've come across, can you please explain this? Whereas Canada is grandstanding about it, is trying to rub our nose in the mud about it, is trying to lecture us and trying to threaten action against our diplomats. These are two contrasting behaviors. If
this is the first time an ambassador has been called the person of interest.
Absolutely.
Nowhere at no time in history.
Nowhere.
An ambassador has been
Never
called.
since the Vienna Convention. Is that
So
what you're saying?
No, that's
Never
a different
ever.
thing. But ambassador never.
Okay.
So between two friends who are mindful of the importance of relationship, US and India interaction on this issue is a case study in itself. Whereas Canada is actually out to destroy this relationship and grandstanding on it and actually imputing motives without even evidence or credible intelligence. It's some kind of a hearsay that they're talking about.
Right. In
You're
fact,
not hearing either Biden or Kamala Harris or any of the politicians
Absolutely.
commenting on this issue. It's in courts, it's being handled there. Trudeau is going in on every television channel and making India look like a terror state.
yeah. I want to bring in Anis Farooqi on that. Anis Farooqi, there's a marked difference with how US has handled the issue and how Canada has handled the issue. Not only is there evidence, not only has it been approached through diplomatic channels, through the proper means and action being taken, but there is no political grandstanding. And that's what really makes this bluster, is what makes things extremely uncomfortable, especially with a friendly country.
I do agree. And if it was a different government, let's say it was a conservative government in Canada, things would have been dealt differently. Like a lot more softly, diplomatically, and within the government to government level, rather than going openly in public on the media. But that does not change the fact that one of the citizens of Canada was murdered. That does not change the fact that there are linkage. That does not change the fact that the Five Eyes and the US and the allies.
General Katoch,
what
yes.
he said, I like the statement of his, which Mr. Farooqi made. He said that does not change the fact that a citizen of Canada was murdered. True. But that also doesn't change the fact who murdered him. You see, that is the whole point. And he, besides being a citizen of Canada, he is also a Canadian terrorist. Let's make it very clear. He's not a Khalistani terrorist. As Smita said, he's a Canadian terrorist who was murdered on Canadian soil. By who? We don't know. And the way I look at it, it is a gangland war. That means another Canadian killed him.
Right.
And now because one Canadian has killed another Canadian terrorist, they want to pin the blame on India. I think that is really stretching it a bit too far. That is not on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
How many Canadians are murdered in a year in Canada? And does every Canadian who's murdered there in Canada a result of somebody else's conspiracy?
In fact, let me bring in Daniel Bordman on that. Let me bring in
Every
many
time a
questions.
Khalistani who's killed
Yeah.
or kills doesn't make that an Indian Khalistani.
Yeah,
It's a
let me-
Canadian Khalistani.
Okay, Anis Farooqi is back with us, I'm told. Yes, Anis, would you like to take that question? Because many questions coming up. I don't know if you heard them, but in terms of every murder, how many such murders are actually attributed to this kind of a conspiracy in Canada?
Well, that's right. But again, there is investigation. The RCMP has done some serious business. Police has done some serious business. There are linkages available, and I would like to see them. The opposition leader would like to see it, but it does not change the fact that nothing happened. Like Five Eyes is not a joke. I will repeat again. This is what Canadians like. Don't
May I
act like that.
ask you, why are they still saying possible and probable?
call
Why
it
are
a
those
fact.
words still being used after a year? Why is there no certainty in the kind of evidence or the
and
kind
make-
of proof
say
that is
whatever I
being put
want.
forward?
I can stand here and say whatever I want.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it a fact.
Yeah. Anis?
Well, again, I agree. And then this is what Mr. Trudeau does. This is the way he has done. It could be like I do not agree with his strategy or the way that things have been handled. But again, like we both nations need to work together. I don't understand why there was a lack of cooperation when we.
But how will you work together? How do you work together if you don't have diplomatic ties? Yes.
This thing of Five Eyes is not a joke. Nobody's saying it's a joke. But then Five Eyes doesn't have the stamp of papal authority or something like that as far as Indians are concerned. You might hold the Five Eyes in great deal of respect. We see that as another grouping. We have the SARC grouping. We have the BRICS grouping. They have intel communities of their own. So we don't consider them some halo around their heads just because they are Five Eyes.
Right. Daniel Boardman, who would like to respond to that? Because here you have people who are saying that Five Eyes has said it, so it's the gospel truth. Is that really the case? And at the end of the day, it could have been handled far, far better than the way Trudeau has.
Well, okay, I don't think anyone's debating that this could have been handled a lot better. And a big problem, both in India and in Canada, is the lack of trust in the RCMP and our institutions right now. From the Indian side, you look at the Air India bombing, that's all you've seen of the RCMP, and it's hard to have any faith in the organization and the system that handled the Air India bombing. That was a pretty big in-your-face failure. Now, from Canadians, Trudeau's political opponents over the last 10 years have also had reason to doubt the RCMP when politics is involved. The Nova Scotia shooting, where Brenda Lucki clearly interceded in a means to protect the Trudeau government's narrative, and then the Freedom Convoy, where the RCMP was laundering fake stories for the CBC to justify the Emergencies Act and all that. So when politics is involved, everyone gets a bit skeptical of our institutions. Now, the number one security agency in Canada right now is American security agencies. All major terrorist plots and whatever in Canada have been foiled by the U.S. agencies, where they then tell the Canadians and they go and arrest them. That's kind of where we're at right now. So when the Americans come in and back us up, that's sort of really all we have here. And listen, okay, there's two. Terry's very right about this. There's two different issues at play here. The first is did they or did they not? And this is the only thing being discussed in Canadian media, okay? It's only did they or did they not? Every other aspect of the story, the Khalistani stuff, Hard Up Nijjar's background, his threats to kill everyone, his links, his fake passports, trying to get all of that's omitted from the Canadian media. All of it's omitted.
But Daniel,
Just
don't Canadians stand to lose the most?
Right.
40% of your international students come from India. A large number of your permanent residents that are given out every year to India. What will happen to Canada if this is the kind of way Indians are treated? Because it will lead to a lot of backlash probably.
Well, yeah, there's immense backlash coming here, and it might be diplomatic. On the other end, like there's a double-edged sword to this student thing. Remember, the student visas into Canada are completely broken. That's how these gangsters got in, and terrorists get in through student visas. Yeah. And it's very important for Indians to know, especially the Indian kids in Punjab. A lot of Canadian schools are fake. They're not real. You're paying $20,000-$30,000 to go to a fake school.
Wow.
And it's human trafficking, okay?
That's another
McGill's a real
outstanding
school,
issue.
U of T's a real school, and all this. But many Indian students are going to Northwest Polytechnic Institute. You end up in a strip mall where there's one room where you take an online class once a week, and that one room is actually a different school. And it's a human trafficking scheme. So Indian students not getting in is probably good for them, right? You have to, if you're in India and you want to go to a Canadian school, make sure it's a real school. Make sure it's a real university.
Well, that's
or else you're getting into human trafficking.
Well, that's really some learning, especially for those who are parents or students watching the show. Perhaps that's a real learning for them. But a quick look, you want to comment on that?
No, please.
Yeah, a quick look at the statistics related to what you just said. Let's just take a quick look in terms of why it matters to Canada and why India matters to Canada particularly. 27% of the permanent residents in Canada are Indians who have taken Canadian permanent residency. 22% of the temporary foreign workers in Canada. It's the second largest group of temporary workers in 2023. This is, of course, another important statistic for Canada. 45% of foreign students. This is what we were talking about. Indians are the largest group of foreign students in Canada. 2.8 million are the NRIs and PIOs, or non-resident Indians and persons of Indian origin. It's the fourth largest immigrant base for Indians. This is also a very important aspect. 1.8 million Indian diaspora in Canada as well. So 1 million NRIs, of course, in Canada that we were speaking about earlier. And there's 830,000 Hindu Canadian citizens there as well. 770,000 Sikh Canadians there as well. And the presence of Khalistanis, of course, impacts all of them. 50% of Indian immigrants with jobs there that require a college degree. And this is, of course, why all of this entire debate is important, not just between the two countries and the diplomatic ties, but for us here in India as well to discuss. On that note, I'd like to thank all our panelists for joining us. Major Dhruv Katot, Suresh Goyal, Smita Prakash, Sushil Pandit, Daniel Boardman, Dean Baxendale, Anis Faruqi and Terry for joining us this evening on this edition of the National Debate.